What the hell is going on with the Cowboys in 2024?
Yeah.
I mean, because you've been around you've been around some legendary people from ownership to front office people to coaches to players.
Yeah.
And you think about the Dallas Cowboys.
Yeah.
And lifelong fan.
Yeah.
Lifelong fan. So
Yeah.
you've seen
I've seen the great.
You've seen all of it.
20 years of winning football.
You've
20
seen
straight
all of
years
it.
of football. Yeah.
And you come to a place now, you're saying, you talked about, I love building the boards and building the rosters and all that kind of stuff. You go through teams. If I put out rosters, if you landed from Mars today and I gave you rosters of teams over the last 15, 20, 25 years, even back to some of the Bill Parcells team, they had a 13-3 team.
Yeah.
And you look at some of those, you go, roster-wise,
Yeah.
these guys should have hoisted more.
Yeah.
What's wrong?
I know too much about the head coach. You know, I'm not putting it all on him, but I know I've worked two places that he's been, Green Bay and Dallas. And I think there's some things about Mike McCarthy that are really good. I think that when you look at how he keeps it, the way he takes care of his team, the way he cares about his team, he's different than a lot of coaches that way. I think that Mike is a very, very good. Now, he's won a Super Bowl. It's been a while ago. But the playoff, there's something not clicking that, you know, that Green Bay game was just horrific. Yeah. And you can't have a collapse like the Eagles have, and then you get the second seed and just let that go away. Just crap it away. And, you know, I mean, I had people yell at me because I said, well, Dan Quinn, you know, getting ready for interviews? I had a guy reach out to me and says, hey, you've been in the league long enough to know he's one of the hardest working guys. And I'm like, okay, fine. Then you guys all wear that. You know, if you don't think that Dan Quinn had something to do with, you know, the way that they played, because they looked non-prepared, you know, with the bust that they had. You know, yeah, sure, they gave up some stuff in the running game, but they had some massive busts in that game defensively. Didn't even look like the same team. So to me, I look at it and you're talking about the roster, great regular season roster. But when it comes down to it, though, that's Mike's responsibility. That's Dan Quinn's responsibility. That's Brian Schottenheimer's responsibility. The players didn't play particularly well, as we talked about, and you know they take some blame in this too. But right now, Jerry Jones is 81 years old. I don't think Jerry Jones is in there every day rolling up his sleeves. When this team was really, really good, Jerry Jones was losing $1 million a month. He was in there fighting every day to keep his team from being sold. And when Jerry Jones, but he was a young man then. Yeah. He was a young man.
Now he's on Forbes. He
ain't
losing much of nothing nowadays.
Now he's not getting his credit card cut up at Love Field.
Right.
Or, those great stories about Jerry Jones. He's handed it off to Steven, and I respect Steven. But I think there's things that when you look at this whole thing with Dak, give Todd France a lot of credit for how he's gotten Dak back to the table quickly here. The problem is they draft very well. I'd say it's a problem. They can't stagger these contracts. But you're wondering, you're like looking at Philadelphia and you're going, wait a minute, that's a comparable roster. How are they going out and doing and this and that? And I just, when I worked with Jerry, he was a risk taker. He was let's trade 2 1s for Joey Galloway, whether it was right or wrong. I mean, let's do this. Let's do,
He was F these picks before Les Snead was F
exactly.
these picks.
And that's the thing about it. And I don't know, Steven and Will are comfortable running this team in a way where, and I go on this long rant on 105.3 The Fan about they don't want change. They don't want somebody new to come in because they want to be able to draft and sign their players and not really have to play in free agency. You know, they have a managerial style where that's what they're comfortable doing. You know, there was a time where Jerry was not comfortable, and that's when he was at his best. But now he's 81 years old, and Steven's taken over the team. And Steven he's comfortable with, you know, they wouldn't want Bill Belichick to come in here when Bill was out of a job, even though Jerry would like, oh, what about Bill? What about Mike Vrabel? You know, these guys don't want somebody to come in because they're comfortable with the way they run their operation now. You know, and I think that you have to, I'm not saying you have to just throw money at, you know, because I got fired with Bill Parcells doing that. But to me, I just look at this team and, you know, the roster is super talented and they just have the worst, they play the absolute worst, they coach the worst at some of the worst times. Yeah.